Warning: the following video may have language that some viewers may find offensive, and others are already offended. Viewer discretion is advised, but not really. No animals were hurt in the making of this 4-hour feature film.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Full Monty video podcast that we shoot and produce right here in St. Thomas, Ontario. And today we're going to take a little trip down memory lane. There's a guest I have in here that, by his voice, I know you're going to know who I'm talking about. Very well known around the city. Back in 1972, this fella started his, I guess we could kind of almost say his broadcast career. CFGM in Richmond Hill. My guest was appearing on the radio over there. He was working urban planning. He went to university, left in 1972 for the region of York. And he was at Richmond Hill at the radio station. After he did the show over there, that was all part of the urban planning, they came to him and offered him a job. So as a young guy, I guess he probably thought that's going to be pretty cool. Working for a radio station, wound up getting an all-night position over there. So keeping all those midnight workers entertained and stuff. So to the show today, we got from 94.1 myFM here in St. Thomas, Ian McCallum. Ian,
how are you doing?
Well, thank you so much for coming.
It's great to be here. I love collecting quotes, and I remember a performer, can't remember his name now, from years ago, said, when you get to that age, it's good to be just anywhere.
That's true. That's true. It is, isn't it? So, 1972.
Yep.
Wow, you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, a few years.
Wow.
In fact, I think pretty well my whole working career has been media. There was a break into print.
Okay, yes,
with the
you
Times
did.
Journal.
St.
Yes.
Thomas Times Journal.
Yeah.
I know. And you know what? I really, really enjoyed that paper like years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
When it started to change companies and dwindle down. And I mean, a lot of local papers did that, right?
Yeah.
They went small. I grew up in Mitchell. We had the Mitchell Advocate.
Yeah.
The Elmer Express was pretty cool. I was always impressed by this great big gigantic paper when you'd open it up.
I told Steve Peters, because when he was an MPP and he'd be in Toronto every session, and I said the true test, Steve, with the Aylmer Express is to take that paper on the Toronto subway and try and open up and read it.
Yeah.
You would take up 3 seats.
Yeah, you would. You'd
Yeah.
block everybody
Yeah.
there. So, St. Thomas Times Journal they've been here a long time, eh?
Well, it was actually 2 papers. There was the St. Thomas Times, and then there was the St. Thomas Journal, and they merged back in the, I believe, sometime in the early 1900s, and became the Times Journal. If you ever look at the front page of one of the papers back then, it was the old style of, and it was a big paper. It was a bit like the Aylmer Express.
Okay.
There had to be 300 stories on the front page.
Oh, wow.
All little boxes of stories.
Okay.
And I always used to wonder, when I used to see those, your eyes and your brain are going, okay, where do we begin? Where's my focal point? Which story do we read first?
Oh my gosh.
It's not like today.
Yeah.
And so it was well quoted. It was well respected. It had a good political reputation.
It was an achievement if you could be on the front page.
Oh, absolutely.
I think I was on it once.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was about. I honestly don't, but
we every so often when I talk to some of the people that work there, we go back to 9/11 that day.
Yeah.
When we printed around 11 in the morning. So we were one of the only papers around that had the story right there.
Wow.
We had to rip the front page apart.
Okay.
And months and months, if not years later, we went back in the file and said, what was supposed to be on the front page that day? Because that all got scrubbed.
Oh.
That's all memory.
Oh, wow.
And we had the picture, we had everything. on the front page.
Now, back then, though, it printed right there in the building, did it
Right
not?
in the building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is so cool. How many people were employed there?
There was a large staff. Even in the newsroom, I would say editorial-wise, there were probably a dozen people at least. There had to be 7 or 8 reporters. We had 2 photographers at one time, sports person, plus your editors.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was, when I first came here, and it didn't take long after that you would talk to somebody in town, and everybody had somebody that worked there at some point in time.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if it was just delivering the paper.
That's one thing, though, from that paper, but what I love today is Jeff Ray's editions that he does with the baby boomers,
Yeah.
or the boomers 55
Yeah.
plus, the hometown. So awesome.
With print. Yeah.
With print.
Yeah.
So
And-
awesome to see. And
Well, and I guess you could probably, he may not be happy with me saying this, but Eric Bendel with his People column is literally the last remnant of the Times Journal,
yeah, yeah.
because he and I were the last 2 people there. And now Eric still got his weekly People column, and good for him. It's a well-read column, and to me, that's the way newspaper
I used to
be.
love, well, when I lived in Grand Bend, we always had the London Free Press.
Yeah.
I loved the letters to the editor.
Yeah.
Love the reading those sections all the time.
Today everybody's a keyboard warrior and
Yeah.
the letters to the editor to me had credibility because someone took the time
Yeah.
to actually physically write or type that letter to you, and then you had to put it in an envelope, and then you had to put a stamp on it.
Yeah.
And then you had to mail it, and 3 or 4 days later we would get it, because we were still doing that when I was at the Times Journal. And you'd think, my goodness, if someone took that much effort, we'll print the letter.
What would you think if you went to your mailbox today and there was an old-fashioned letter written to you? Like you pull out an envelope, you'd be like, what is this?
I'd probably be suspicious.
Would you?
It's like, because I had one somewhere, I don't know why I had it, those little yellow plastic centers that you put in the middle of a 45 record.
Oh, yeah.
And I had one of those, and people were, what is that?
They had no idea.
No.
Oh, my
What would
gosh.
you use that for?
Oh, wow.
And then you say, well, it's for a vinyl record. Well, what's a vinyl record? You went down a rabbit hole of your own, going over past things.
I remember coming home from work, going out, feeding the pigs, and then coming back in. And the first thing I looked at was to see if the little red light was blinking on my cassette tape answering machine.
Oh, okay.
Now, if it was blinking, I was so excited. Oh,
You
wow,
had a
somebody
message.
left me a message.
Yeah.
Like, this is cool.
Yeah.
And now.
Well, you see, somebody used to be on, well, now called X, but Twitter, used to put up pictures of old things and do you know what this is? And they had a cassette and they had a pencil.
Oh, yeah, I know what that's about.
And you had to do
Winding
that. Yes.
spinning.
And I bet you could show that to you, not to disparage young people, but they probably, what is the connection between a pencil and a cassette?
I had another one of that. Cassette or 8-track
Yeah.
and Scotch tape.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Remember when the tape would break?
Yeah, it would break.
And you would put a little piece of tape across that. I'd pull the ends out, put them down, a little piece of tape, and then wind it in with a pencil.
Well, I'll tell you another one. There's a second reason.
Okay.
On the back, they had 2 little tabs.
Yes, they
so
did.
So you put the tape there and you couldn't record over it.
Yes, that's right.
Holy smokes, we're aging ourselves here.
There was lots I had to.
Talk about Jeff Ray's Boomers magazine. We're right here live right now.
We are dating ourselves. Yeah, that's
well,
right.
I just heard about these things. You probably lived through. I've just heard about them because I'm much younger.
You are so full of crap. Jesus. All right, so 1972.
Yeah.
You're in university. So tell us about this CFGM experience. So what happened?
Yeah, I graduated from York University in urban planning, and no idea where it would lead to. I had worked at the radio station at York, Radio York. So I get a job in urban planning, thrilled that, hey, my 3 years of university has paid off. And one of my first assignments was to go to the radio station in Richmond Hill. It's no longer there now, CFGM. and do a 1 week sort of employment survey as to the people that worked there, where were they traveling from, what were their travel patterns, things like that.
Right.
And so I spent the week there, got to know everybody, fit right in, and kind of enamored with the fact that, hey, I'm not working here, but this is radio. I've made radio, but I'm not working here. And at the end of the last day I was there, a gentleman named Bill Anderson, I still fondly remember him, said, hey, would you like to work here? Well, that's like a kid in a candy shop. Bill, you got to be kidding. You're offering me a job. And it was to be to work the all night show as an operator, what they call an operator. There was not someone there live. You had what we call voice tracks. But the neat thing about the station, about CFGM, a good chunk of the staff all had come from the monstrous radio station in Toronto called Chum.
Okay.
And the person that owned the station was Alan Slate, whose sons are still around, the Slate Foundation, who donate a lot of money to Canadian broadcasting, Canadian performers. But the sort of silent partner in that station was Gordon Lightfoot.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So 2 or 3 of the announcers that worked there were announcers I had listened to growing up.
Okay.
And I used to put my transistor radio, there's another thing going back in time, under my pillow and listen to Chum and got to know the formats and everything else.
Okay.
Well, 2 or 3 of the announcers I listened to worked at that station. So for me to sort of have my childhood idols, Bob McAdory and Dave Johnson and a couple of the others, to be able to work with them, oh my goodness.
That's cool.
Life doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
Urban planning, sorry, it doesn't fit the bill anymore.
Isn't that something? You went to school for that.
Yep.
3 years, 4 years?
3 years.
3 years.
Yep.
I went to radio.
Yep. And I think I broke my parents' hearts because
I bet.
they saw radio as a hobby.
Oh, did they?
So
really?
they're bless them, not anger or anything at them, but it became sort of, well, when you get this out of your system, when you outgrow that, and then you get a real job.
Yeah.
And here we are all these years later.
That is so cool.
Yeah. I always live by the adage, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or I want to be in radio when I grow up. Well, you can't do both.
That's right. That's right. I remember growing up, I used to listen, I would hear it through the wall. My mom would listen to old-time mystery theater music. I think it was probably CBC Radio at that time did those, but I grew up listening to a lot of the old-time theaters on the radio. They were so cool. Then I got into a little older WABC out of New York.
Yes, New York.
Jay Diamond.
Yeah.
Was a guy that I used to listen to the Jay Diamond Show, and he was kind of a talk show host that was kind of I guess what Howard Stern would be today without all the really vulgarity.
Yes.
But Jay was pretty adamant on, he didn't hold back on what he was thinking or whatever. And I used
tell
to
it like it is.
Yeah, and I used to love listening to him. Which now today there's a guy that still has his show. It's a syndicated show all across Canada. I've been on his show 3 times, I think now, Roy Green.
Oh, yes, okay.
And Roy is a fantastic Chorus Radio Network.
Yeah.
I've known Roy for 30 years, I guess. When I started the Extinguishers for Cindy campaign, I wrote a letter. I still have an old file from my radio days that I had all contacts across Ontario, well, pretty much Canada, of all big networks and reporters. And whatever. So I fired out this one letter to this file, and it emailed there. And Roy was the very first one, called me within hours and said, we had a great chat catching up, but he's like, let's do a taping on Friday. He said, I want you on the show. And I was like, super. This is great. So across Canada, we went with that. And he's kind of like the Jay Diamond of, because boy, if you piss Roy off, he got no problem telling you either. Okay. On the radio.
Tell it like it is. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story just quickly. And I was early teens and used to stay up half the night listening to Chum. the all-night announcer was a guy named Bob Lane. And one of the features he ran in the 12 to 1, midnight to 1 o'clock hour was he would get the next day's race forum for Woodbine Racetrack. And it was called Lane's Losers. And he would tell you which horses he predicted would win the races. Oh, yeah. And so I used to, and he had a pre-produced intro, Lane's Losers, and it went on and like that. And so I used to listen to that. It was just such refreshing live radio. Well, years and years later, I got the chance to meet Bob Lane down in New Orleans at a radio convention. And I introduced myself and, hey, I was a big fan of yours. And the first thing, and I told him about Lane's Losers. And the first thing he said to me was, sure hope you didn't bet on any of those horses. Because I think he lost most of, fictitiously money. But he used to have a running count as to how far up or down he was. He was down quite a bit of money.
Wow. So where were you born, Ian?
I was born in Scotland.
Scotland?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That's my number one bucket list to go to.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to go see the castles. And
Yeah. Well, if you
Scotland.
need someone to carry your suitcases, let me know. I'm available.
What do you think of these little things that you see on Facebook now that are like, be a lord or whatever, own a piece of Scotland? You can buy that little tiny, it's like a square foot of land. They're selling them, and
Don't you make fun of that, because I own a 1-inch square of Scotland.
Is it a 1 inch?
Through one of the well-known distilleries, where you could own, I think it's like a 1 centimeter or 1 square inch. So
I wasn't sure if it was a foot or a square.
It may be a little bit bigger. It's not that much bigger.
So it is real.
Well,
this thing
I think if you go over there and say, hey, where's my land? I'm not. They say it's in this general area.
Yeah, okay.
And you can be lord of the manor there, but I'm not sure that it's big enough you could even stand on. But apparently I own one little tiny bit of it. I'm not sure.
It blows my mind that people, so that they can legitimately called lord something. But the other part of me thinks of that kind of seems degrading to the folklore and the history of the country and the people that actually are lords and whatever. Like, now you've got just these little people, I should say little people.
Tony, let me interrupt here.
Yeah.
You're dealing with people whose biggest historical asset is the Loch Ness Monster. Okay, so
Nessie.
we can embellish a story.
Okay.
And make it.
I see where you're going.
Yeah. So you see where we're coming from
I see
here.
where you're coming. Yeah.
It's that old saying, don't let facts get in the way of a good story.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And so the Loch Ness Monster has done wonders for tourism over there.
Well, Nessie.
Nessie?
She's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Still in search of today?
Well, she is there. It's just, let's use the word elusive.
Okay. Now, you talk about Loch Ness Monster. Did you know that we have our own kind of a Loch Ness here in Ontario? Not far from us here.
No.
Kettle Stony Point.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
If you go into the band office,
yeah,
above the door, I don't know if it's still there today. Maybe somebody can verify this, but there was a pipe above the door, and it's called Keeper of the Serpent.
Oh, okay.
And from Port Franks into Lake Huron and everything, the stories are of the elders in Kettle Stony Point seeing the water creature that would come up in the lake. And the folklore is there are massive tunnels under the lake that this creature can swim and go around other areas.
Okay.
And now, could be. I don't know.
I see. As a purveyor of the Loch Ness story, we're going to have to maybe call over there and embellish this story a little more about under.
You know what?
And if I'd known we were going to be talking about Scotland and Loch Ness, I would have worn my kilt today.
Oh,
of course,
there you go.
That would have gone over well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. The snow and the wind and.
Okay, you're discouraging me here, but I would have worn it.
Okay. That's awesome. So Scotland, I never knew that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I did not know that. So when did you come to
Kingdom
Canada?
of Fife is where I lived.
Kingdom of Fife.
I was born in Edinburgh.
Were you really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Love Scotland.
Yeah.
That's why you have that Braveheart kind of look to you. The long hair.
No, that's a sign that it's going to be a tough winter.
Oh, is that what
Yes.
the sign is?
Yeah.
It's like when the corn, you can tell how deep the snow is by how high the last cob.
My hair started growing way back in the fall, and I thought, well, this is going to be a tough winter.
She's going to be burry.
And look at it outside. We can see out the window here. It's a tough looking winter out there. And it's going to be even worse tomorrow.
This February is kicking us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tomorrow's going to be, this is nothing today to what's supposed to be
I'm
tomorrow.
afraid to see what my hair is going to look like tomorrow morning.
Okay, so you came to Canada with a family. So what year was
My
that?
dad came over first.
Okay.
At that time, which was in the 50s, Canada was actively seeking people to come over and work.
Yes.
And so they had like job fairs and things over in Scotland. My dad was what they call a slater. He worked on slate roofs, but that was not something that was really prevalent over in Canada. And so he emigrated first, and my mom and I stayed with my grandparents in Fife, a little coal mining town. And then we came about a year later, and we came right after Hurricane Hazel hit, and
in Toronto,
and people actually died in the Toronto area.
Yes, they did.
And my mom and I are, kind of looking at my dad, going, "What the hell have we come to?" So, okay, but we thought, okay, this is a regular occurrence, but it wasn't. That was. Certainly something that was out of the ordinary.
That was.
But my mom and I flew over, and we were 2 or 3 days late because we flew out of an airport in Scotland that then was called Prestwick, right on the coast. That was a fog-free airport. That's why they built it there. No fog.
Oh, really? Okay.
3 days later, after the fog finally lifted, we were able to come to Canada. So much for the fog-free airport.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
My dad came over first like that. He was from Belgium, went to England, met my mom. My brother and my sister were born in England. They came over 1965. They took the boat. We weren't rich. They couldn't fly. Yeah, that was we had to take the boat. But anyway, they did. I was born here. I was the only one that was born here.
I'll tell you a funny story. When we flew over here, my mom and I, it wasn't a jet plane. It was propeller, Super Constellation. And partway through the flight, it was at night. My mom told me the story. I don't remember anything about this. But you could actually see sort of fiery exhaust out of the back of one of the propellers. And that's normal. My mom wasn't always the best of flyers, called the flight attendant over and said, there appears to be fire or flame coming out of the engine. And the flight attendant very graciously and kindly said to my mom, let me know when you don't see flame, because then we have a problem.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yep. And I'm sure she's been asked that many times.
Yes.
There's fire.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you get to Canada, Hurricane Hazel had made herself
a great welcome.
Yeah, wasn't it? Eh?
Yeah.
Now, how old were you?
I was only 5 at that time.
You were 5.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do have some memories of Scotland, but it'd be very few. Eh?
I've been back quite a few times to see my grandparents, and they came over here. But I was over. Last time was about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. One of my relatives had died, and I went over. But I've gone over. I certainly encourage you if you want to see Scotland.
I want to. Yes. I really want to.
You'll want to get a copy of McCallum's travel guide that
travel guide.
I can personally autograph for you and highlight all the well-known pubs to go visit.
You're going to make this really difficult. Okay, we'll have to talk. I was back, I was 9 years old, 1977, I think it was. We went to England and Paris and Belgium and went and saw all the family around. Yeah. This is the one thing I love about Facebook, though. My dad's side of the family, my dad died, I was 18 years old, just turning 19 when he died. He's been gone a long time. Then never lost track of that whole side of the family.
Yeah.
just only till a few years ago where his side got back in contact, and
Yeah, that's where social media
great.
does play a good
were
role.
so
Yeah.
great. Yeah. And then I really got them. They were writing to me in English, and she was apologizing, my cousin, and I'm so sorry, I'm not very good at English, but
Yeah.
and I could read that, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I get what she said. And then I would go to Google Translate, and I type everything in I wanted and translate it to French. And then I would copy paste, I'd send it to her, and then I got this great big thing back, and it started in huge capital letters
Yeah.
in French. So I copied, pasted back, Google Translate back to English, and it was like, oh my God, you can speak French. and then this whole thing, so I wrote back in English that I said, no, I just use Google Translate.
Yes,
So
I have to admit, yes.
that was so cool, though.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun, and now today, anyway, we're able to stay in touch. So it's pretty neat they've sent me a lot of photographs of my family from back then, and my dad.
Oh, sure.
And my grandfather that I never met.
Great way to
I never
learn.
knew.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, when you worked for the Times Journal,
Yep.
when did you become aware that we were losing it? Like it was going to be, the building was gone. Like we saw the publishing part of it going.
It had undergone so many ownership changes.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was under a company called Pierre Carl Pelado, Quebecor.
Okay.
And you could see the writing was on the wall. I think he actually, I vividly remember the day he actually came into the building. Everybody was terrified because they had not heard good things about him. Yeah. And you could tell that heavy pall of doom and gloom was over the building. It was only a matter of time.
Right.
Our thought was that they would get rid of the print edition and just be online, and that's basically where they're going.
Yeah.
But there's a funny story about that because Pierre and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was kind of his right-hand man, came in the building, and everybody was terrified. And everybody was either hiding in the washroom or in the cloakroom or somewhere. And he came up to the editorial department, and we still had a fairly big staff. And he came in and he started wandering around and looking, and you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
It was very uncomfortable. And I thought, okay, somebody's got to do something. Somebody's got to, because this is deathly. And so I thought, okay, we need to break the ice here with some humor.
Yeah.
And so Pierre was actually with us right in the cluster in the news area. And he was looking at things, and it was so uncomfortably quiet. And so I turned to his right-hand man and I said, I understand you're touring around all the different newspapers in the area that we own. Oh, yes, absolutely. And I said, well, tell you what, it's coming up to 4:00. I'm short a story. I've got about a 300-word story that I need to fill here. Could you go over to that desk there and just write a quick story of what you've been doing and what you and Pierre have been doing? And he looked at me and he had no idea what to say.
That's awesome.
Turned to Pierre Carl, and it was like he just sort of like... And Pierre Carl, I think, saw what was happening, that this was, okay, here's a great icebreaker here.
Yeah.
And he laughed, and he laughed at me, and that turned the whole tide.
Oh, cool.
And I thought, you know, it's like bring somebody in from the bullpen and get us out of this jam.
Hey, if it didn't work, what else? You had nothing.
Well, we
to lose,
all thought
right?
we're all going to be fired or let go anyways. So
That's right.
It's like...
So in your opinion, though, what do you think really killed? Was it internet? Online? Is that what really killed newspapers?
No, bottom line, it just came
Bottom
down
line?
to, and
Yeah.
no understanding of what a small town newspaper means.
Okay.
We started getting stories that one of their papers in Belleville was going to be shut down. One in Kingston was going to be, I think, the Whig Standard.
Okay.
And it was just like you sat with a piece of paper and you we don't need that. What's this one here? No, we don't need that. And you're talking 150 years of history.
Yeah.
And it was
that's
just
true.
out the window.
Wow.
No.
That's a huge loss. Ian.
Well, no appreciation because they didn't understand small town papers or medium-sized community papers.
Yeah.
They're the heart of they're the heart of that community.
Absolutely.
It's a bit like a school. it's the heart of the community. And to just take
Absolutely.
a red pen and just wipe it off the
Stroke it
map.
off. Yeah. Were sales getting harder and harder to get for advertising?
They were getting tougher. But I think that was media in general.
Was it? Yeah.
Was getting tougher because you're just starting to get into computers and internet and online presence, and that was sort of the new toy in town. And there's some glitz and glamour to that.
I miss our paper.
But people love to hold up the newspaper.
Oh, absolutely.
And I remember I used to get invited to schools to talk to the kids about working at the newspaper, and this was when computers were already out now. Yeah. And I remember being in one of the classrooms, and one of the young kids had a small, like a tablet with him, and I had a copy of the newspaper. And I used to love teasing the kids, and I would say, in this case, I said to the young kid, I said, that black tablet you've got there, do you think that's better than my newspaper? And of course the kids, oh absolutely, this everything's on here. And I said, really? I said, but that's better than the newspaper. Oh yeah. And I said, well, let me ask you something, because I can't seem to find on this newspaper. Here, I'll toss it to you. And I tossed the paper to him. Can you show me where you have to plug this thing in to charge it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the kid he looked at me, and his friends all kind of turned at him, and yeah, you have to charge that every night, don't you?
Yeah.
And so it was it was a good chance to have some fun with them.
I can't even look at all the ebooks and people on phones, or they're reading a novel on a tablet, whatever.
Yep.
I can't do it. I tried.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I gotta physically have a
that
book,
there. Yeah.
The book. I can't. It just does not, to hold that tablet or even on your phone, it does not have anywhere of the power impact of
No. There's something about the
physical
feel, and they don't. Well, even in the end with the ink, sometimes you would get the black ink.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah,
that's why they call reporters and that they used to call them ink stained wretches, because by the end of the day you'd have black ink all over you.
Oh my God!
So would the pressman in the press room. Yeah. But there was something about it. Well, in the end, they went to sort of a vegetable based ink that didn't stain as bad.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't quite the same.
I remember growing up, the Beacon Herald in Stratford. I used to deliver that when I was in high school and stuff. And Mitchell Advocate delivered that. And actually, Beacon Herald and Mitchell, too, I used to deliver. And I remember as a kid, the black fingers from the ink back then. But there was the smell of the papers, the inserts. Got a job years ago putting inserts in the Beacon Herald when I lived in Stratford.
Well, now that we talk about it, actually, you've jogged my memory here. My media career actually began when I was around 15 or 16, because I lived in Toronto and used to deliver the Toronto Telegram, which was printed on pink paper.
Really?
For whatever reason. Well, I had to distinguish it. That eventually, years later, became the Toronto Sun. Paul Godfrey and some of the others that had been involved with the Telegram went over and brought out.
But so what took you from radio then, when you were at Richmond Hill, and then you jumped over to print, like newspaper? Was it?
Well, I worked
what drew you in there?
I worked at 7 or 8 different other stations. I went from Richmond Hill, worked for a short time in Oshawa, a radio station called CCAR.
Okay.
And then worked at one of the top country stations in Canada, not there anymore, in Hamilton, called CHAM, 820 CHAM, with some great people there. And then got a call one day from one of the people that had used to work at CHUM in Toronto, who had come to London and was running BX93 and CJBK. Warren Cosford called me up one day out of the blue. I had no idea who he was. And said, hey, I'm going to be in Hamilton tonight. Let's have dinner. And I'm going, okay, like who is this? And next thing you know, he offered me a job to be a program director at BX93. And I had never worked at FM radio. And so said, sure. It broke my heart to have to tell the people in CHAM that I was moving on. But it was a tough call.
So what, we're in today's world now, 94.1 myFM. How do you, let's talk a little bit about that being a local station for the city. So how do you guys get your ratings or your popularity from the people? How is it based on?
We're not part of the ratings that used to be called BBM, Bureau of Broadcast Measurement.
Okay.
We're not part of that. The London stations are, but we're not.
Okay.
Popularity is based on feedback from listeners.
Okay.
Feedback from clients, and just general. The reason I went there, they approached me about working there, was because it was local.
Okay.
And actually, it's not even local. It's hyper local. It's like on the block. It's this block. It's the block over there. It's get in the high schools, cover high school sports. We every afternoon on my newscast during the school year, I'll go looking for all the sports scores with the high schools and get that in there.
I've seen you out there. I mean, you're pretty popular, like when there are certain things going around. I'll see photographs.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Ian.
Yeah, you have to be.
Yeah.
But that's why you get into this.
Yeah.
It's not a 9-to-5 job. You got to love spontaneity.
Yeah.
Just when you think, gee, only an hour and I'll be done. Oh, there's a fire.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go cover the fire.
You know, when I worked at Rogers TV, and back when at one point I was the only guy there, other than our producer. I was driving Cox cabs. I used to actually have the big camera in the trunk of the car.
You carry it
I
with
worked
you.
all night because when something happened.
Yeah.
And I've had some of that footage go to CFPL TV.
Yeah.
They've called and said, hey, they've seen the footage that I've had or whatever. Can we use it? Or I'll send it over and give them the right, say, hey, by all means, use it. But that's how I got my stuff at night was George Clark did we had the first local show.
Yeah.
I think we also had Ion Elgin at that time, and I would capture stuff at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which now Tim, I think O'Neill, the producer for Rogers, he kind of laughed. He says, like, yeah, you can't even do that anymore. Like the policies have changed so much. But
everything has changed.
What a way that I was able to capture. It was cool because a lot of times I was the only one that got it.
Oh, yeah. It's a bit like today with your cell phone, citizen journalism.
Yeah.
You can all be there.
Yeah.
But that was one of the reasons why I loved news and getting in news is some of the really neat people that you meet over your career.
Yes. Yes.
Performers, but there's two that stand out. She came to St. Thomas and spoke at Parkside, a survivor of, I think it was Auschwitz, of one of the concentration camps. And the one that is to me is just riveted in my mind. I'm not sure that you'll remember the picture. It was from the Vietnam War, that famous iconic picture of the century of this little girl, 11 years old, running down the street. She had no clothes on. It had all been burnt in a napalm bomb explosion. And she had her brother and sister running behind her, and they're soldiers. And she's screaming her head off. I met her later. She moved to Canada and is still alive.
I think I remember
lives in either Ajax or Oshawa.
Okay.
And she came to Bible Baptist Church here and spoke one time. I got a chance to speak to her. Wow. And you think there's a picture that's iconic of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And there's a little girl now.
That would be more impactful, I think, for sure. I mean, I have met celebrities and singers and different things like that. And I don't go goo-goo over that.
No.
The ones that stick out were, I would think, something like that. For me, the biggest one that I was involved with, Elgin Street, when the fire happened up, T.J. Wade was the boy that was killed.
Oh, yes.
The young boy.
Remember that, yeah.
And I was called... My producer called me in Rogers and said I was taking the camera and sitting down with the family and doing an interview.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have no idea what to talk to him about.
No.
Like, what how am I going to do this? And I sat for like 3 hours with him all around the kitchen table, had the camera set up, and we just talked.
Yeah.
And then I got back and he says, okay, I want 2 minutes. And I said, I can't. There is absolutely no way. The crying, the tear, like everything that was happening, the story came out to, I got it down to about 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't do it anymore. Like there's just impossible. I can't. So they did wind up, it was on daytime, I think, the show. Sarah Francis and Sean Avram were on, and they split it. They did it in a two-part. And they played the whole thing. Yeah. And I've never forgotten that story. That was the most
I remember
emotional.
that. Yeah. I remember that because he ran back in the house to get a pet.
Yeah.
And but that's one of the philosophies I've had because there are times when news falls in your lap like that, a fire, it falls in your lap and you go, okay, that's a great story. The ones that have impact, I think, are the ones where someone says, hey, see that person over there? You should go over and talk to them sometime. Yeah. They got an interesting story. And you do, and you come out with this great human interest story.
Yeah.
And because I always live by that philosophy that everybody's got a story to tell. You just got to get it.
All right, Ian.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
I really appreciate it.
I just wish we'd tape this, but I mean, we could recreate it maybe.
AI is amazing.
Oh yeah, get my voice. Yeah,
we'll AI it.
Yeah.
William Wallace is sitting here. Yeah.
Hi, laddie.
Hi, laddie. Yeah, that's right. All right. There you go, everybody. There's a voice for our 94.1 myFM, and Ian McCallum joined us today, so we got lots to learn of his history and our Times Journal.
You know why I feel good about this interview?
Why is that?
I really feel good about this, Tony, because you have to edit it, not me.
Yes, I do have to edit it, but you know what? And I still follow, and I tell everybody, I said, from when I used to do stories, I do very limited edit. Because you know, as being in this industry, you can turn a viewer or a reader, you can make them go down certain ways that you want them to go. Yeah. I can make or break a story. I can make it, a general neutral story. You can make it look actually bad. You can make it look super good. Editing has a lot of power.
Oh, sure does.
And I like to always, and I've always been this way, I will come out, I will give you the pretty much unedited. I just, from where we start to where we stop. But everything in between, I usually leave in there. Yeah. I don't take it out, and it's for you to decide. Yeah, how that story is.
How that story goes. Yeah,
and that's how I've always liked to do it.
I'll give you a piece of advice. So when I do interviews, I always tell people that once this airs, that I get 10% of any movie contracts or commercial.
Oh, I'll tell you right now, I'll give you 25.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not okay. Movie contracts, no problem.
You know who I interviewed when she was in high school?
Rachel?
Yes. Yeah. Did I ask her that? Did I tell her that? No. I missed out. That's why I'm here, still working.
You're still working. So, yeah, you could have, could have paid off.
Could have been, we wouldn't be sitting here talking.
Awesome. But all right, folks, thanks again. Tune in soon, and we'll see who our next guest is, all right? Bye for now. There you go. That is so awesome.